Hey everyone, welcome to the 259th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have it's a pretty fun show for you today. We're going to be talking about the end of some lighting essentials. We're also going to be talking about setting up Home Assistant. I'm going to give an update on a cryptocurrency-powered LoRaWAN router. It's going to be great. If you don't know what those words mean, stay tuned. You're going to find out. We've got some news from Google Jacquard, Amazon Go, Apple, Google Home, Arlo, and a new Ring doorbell to discuss. Plus, this week's guest is Spencer Wright, who is a manufacturing expert, the creator of The Prepared, a newsletter I adore, and he is going to be talking to us about how COVID-19 affects small-scale manufacturing and large-scale manufacturing for all of us who are like, what happens to my Kickstarters or my IoT devices that I want to buy during the holiday season? We'll also hear from one of our sponsors, MachineQ, and we'll also answer a question about a landlord seeking information about making his properties smarter. So now, let's hear from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is LiveWorks. LiveWorks is the definitive event for digital transformation. Join more than 7,000 industry leaders who are looking to improve their operational efficiencies, drive productivity, and guarantee success in the connected future this June in Boston. LiveWorks is packed with networking and content, including more than 40 sessions focused on industrial IoT. Also, I will be speaking there, and I would love for you to come join me. Say hi, maybe bump elbows. Stacey on IoT listeners will get an exclusive 20% discount with code IoT20. So go visit LiveWorks, LiveWorks.com for more information. And I really hope to see you in June. Okay, Kevin. We got some news this week. Some of it was news to us, and some of it was not news to us. So two lighting.
But it was news to a lot of other people, apparently, who don't listen to our show.
Exactly. So two lighting companies, Philips Hue and Osram, which makes the Lightify lights, both of those announced shutdowns. Or rather, Philips Hue, we'll start with that because that got the most publicity, probably because more people have Philips Hue light bulbs. Philips Hue said in a tweet that they were shutting down their first generation hub. This means that if you have a first generation hub, your lights are still going to work, but your hub is no longer going to control them. And this is going to happen actually at the end of April. Philips put this news out very stealthily by changing their terms and conditions last year, roughly around the middle of last year. We actually noticed it in November. And at the time when we said, I was like, someone had DM'd me and had seen it and was like, hey, is this true? And I was like, oh my goodness, it is. So we wrote about it. We talked about it on the podcast. And I was surprised that Philips did not draw more attention to it at the time.
Well, they didn't have to because everybody else did that this past week. For some reason, this was like a major headline all over the interwebs.
It's because Philips actually tweeted it out this week.
Well,
they said,
okay.
By the way, we told you a while back, but just so you know, the end of April, your first gen hubs are going to stop working.
So the news cycle jumped on it this week because of that. But I thought some of the headlines were rather careless. I mean, I read one that was, and I can't quote it because I don't recall it exactly, but it was basically, your Philips Hue lights will soon stop working. And that's not true. That's not the whole story. And it's not all Philips Hue bulbs. So I was kind of disappointed with how some outlets actually reported this, but that's just me.
And as part of this change, which you may not have noticed, I didn't see it in a lot of stories, Philips also said that they're only going to support their hubs for 3 years after purchase. They may support it longer, but they reserve the right to basically shut things down 3 years after purchase.
And frankly, I mean, they're kind of in a transition, in my opinion, anyway, because they're getting away from the bulbs that need these hubs. And while they still sell them, they're also selling Bluetooth bulbs.
Right. And that wouldn't need a hub. It just they work with the Google Home. They work with Amazon Madam A.
Work directly from your phone, whatever you want to do.
But I've spent I'm going to say close to $1,000 on Philips Hue Zigbee-based bulbs and accessories. And those are designed to last 23, like the bulbs are designed to last for like up to 23 years, right? These are LEDs.
And they will.
They may not. You know. Who knows? That's a long time. But
they're getting dumb now.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting thing because people are upset, and I get it. You would have to buy another hub, so that's another $50 to $60. But this is exactly what people proposed as a solution when Sonos cut their support for their devices. They were like, well, yeah, speakers last for a really long time. You should have a thin device that manages the speakers and has all the smarts that you can replace.
I was actually going to bring that up because you had also spent close to $2,000 on your Sonos equipment. So as soon as you said that, I was about to say, oh, you just got Sonos again.
Yeah, I did, except not quite, because the $1,000 worth of equipment will still be worthwhile. I just need to update my hub, which is a $50 to $60 investment.
Right.
So that's Philips Hue. But another lighting system, this time it's Osram's Lightify system. These are actually, the cloud servers are going to shut off on August 31st, 2021. So don't panic. You still
Lots of lead time. Lots of lead time.
Like 15 more months. Is that 15 more months? Yes-ish. 16 more months.
Yeah.
I'm like sitting here counting on my fingers. I'm like, wait a second. What month are we in?
It's many months away.
It's a long time. But what's going to happen is after that date, the Lightify service and support will be discontinued. You will have no further updates, and you will no longer be able to connect these to Amazon or Google Voice assistants.
So I actually have some Osram bulbs, but I never used the Lightify cloud system. I wonder if they make different bulbs that are Lightify cloud-based only and just regular Osram bulbs. I don't know. I didn't get this email that explaining that the servers are getting switched off.
Disturbingly, I didn't either, and I actually have a Lightify account. So I was like, wait, what happened to mine? However, maybe it's coming. Maybe they noticed I haven't used my Lightify account for almost a year. I don't know. Some things to know. If you have Lightify bulbs, you can move them over to any Zigbee-based compatible smart hub. And I actually have controlled my Lightify lights through the Wink Hub in the past. And that
As have I, yes. And I'm actually doing it now with SmartThings.
Yes, and you could work on with SmartThings. So that's good. Again, this is like basically, in this case, this is the cloud shutting down, but a lot of your investment in the hardware should still be just fine.
But it gets to why they're actually shutting this down. And when they do explain that in the email, and it has to do with when these bulbs came out, they used the Zigbee Lightlink and Zigbee Home Automation standard. And now Zigbee is up to 3.0 new standards. So you kind of bought products that the standard isn't going to be supported anymore by this company. Again, you can use other hubs.
Right. And basically they just can't invest in this. And that makes sense. You know, they thought this was going to be awesome. They basically were like, yeah, you know, we divested this business in 2016, which was a while back. And now we're just not doing it. So I will say to y'all, this feels like bad news, but we're actually seeing an evolution in how companies handle this. Philips Hue, I think, didn't do the best job when they did theirs last year. But the Lightify folks, see, I would feel better if I got the email. But in their communication, they're being very clear. They are doing it very far in advance, which is helpful. And they're trying really, I mean, you still have the ability to make your older stuff work. You won't have all of the stuff. I used to have Lightify. I had bulbs, but I also had outdoor lights that I really liked. And we actually recommended on the show. So if you purchase those, know that they will no longer work from the cloud and you'll have to move those over to a hub, ideally SmartThings.
This makes me wonder, though, and we don't expect an answer. This is just a question. Part of this is because they've divested this business, but the other part is that the standards and technologies they used in 2016. And there are newer standards now. Okay. What happens in 3, 4, 5 years when there's even newer standards? And I just mean industry-wide.
Historically, many of the standards for the consumer world have been backwards compatible. So look at the efforts that the Wi-Fi Alliance has made to keep Wi-Fi backwards compatible. This makes a lot of sense because consumers don't like change. They don't want their old stuff to break. The same thing happens with Bluetooth. Zigbee and Z-Wave have been less focused on that because for a long time they weren't in normal consumer products, right? They were in products designed for professionals to install. So I think this is kind of a natural evolution. Again, early adopters kind of getting the short end of the stick.
That would be us.
So yeah, I feel like this is going to keep happening. We're going to see this happening probably in the next year or two, a lot more, as some of these early stage IoT businesses wind down and get acquired. And people are like, what am I going to do with this? I don't want to support this. Be prepared. Okay. So if you're buying light bulbs, maybe buy, Kevin, you're like, buy Wi-Fi light bulbs. And I'm kind of like, buy Lutron. They're light switches. That's our advice for today, which is not maybe what people want to hear. And, I am going to upgrade. I've already updated my Philips Hue hub. I've got the Gen 2 hub, but I actually bought like 5 years ago. So I'm like sitting here thinking, oh, well, they could shut that down at any time too, based on their terms and conditions.
This gets into why I'm against the bridges and the hubs to some degree, but...
I know. All right. Well, let's talk about a different kind of hub.
Let's.
A Pi hub? How would I describe this? You have been installing Home Assistant.
Yes, a do-it-yourself hub is probably the best way to describe it. And I mentioned this on a couple shows ago that I'm going to take up the plunge into the Home Assistant world. And for those who are not familiar, it is a hub product, software-based. You have to provide your own hardware, in which case I used a Raspberry Pi, which is the minimum you would want to use. You could certainly do this on your own always running computer, but just to dip a toe in the water, I'm using a Raspberry Pi. All I did was the setup process because I wanted to see what it was like. I want to take my time and see if it's who can do this and who cannot, how difficult it is. And frankly, I'm going to say 90 to 95% of the people who listen to this show are technical enough to do this, to install Home Assistant.
Wow. I feel that audience, y'all are amazing. I read this and I was like, oh, I cannot.
No, I think you got turned off by it because it is many steps and it's all a manual process. And I will say, kudos to the Home Assistant group. And this is open source software, so a lot of different people are contributing. The instructions are actually quite good. Every once in a while, you might run into some kind of gotcha like I did. Like, for example, I had to mount the boot partition of the SD card of the Home Assistant software to configure a text file with my Wi-Fi settings. I know how to do that. I can do that, but the boot partition wasn't even showing in my file manager. I think that would stump a lot of people who didn't see it. Like, well, how do I mount something that isn't there? I use Linux. I'm taking programming classes. I knew how to do that. So even technical people, if they haven't run into that particular situation, you could run into a problem here or there, but it's doable. It really is. If you are a off-the-shelf kind of consumer that just wants to go buy a hub, plug it in and go, I still think you could do this, but I don't think you will, I guess is probably the best way to say it. And that's what you said. You're like, I don't want to deal with this. You
would not enjoy it. Not that plugging in a hub and setting that up is any fun, but it felt like it would take longer. But so this was the initial setup, and we're going to keep coming back to this because you've turned on a light. But do you have any first impressions of the robustness or interest you might have in the platform?
Well, I did look at all the different plugins you can add. Out of the box, it found, I'd say, a third of my smart devices. So I have to add some plugins. But as far as robustness, just based on the plugin library, I think there isn't anything you probably can't do with Home Assistant. Whereas I've run into other limitations on other hubs. I suspect this is probably the most robust solution out there at a relatively inexpensive price point, because you could get a Pi for $55, the highest model for Pi, which is what I did. I bought a kit that included the cables and the case. It was $113, but whatever. That's relatively cheap as compared to a professional installation system, right? That's thousands of dollars. So robustness, I suspect this is probably the most robust.
Well, while you were trying out Home Assistant, I was trying out the Helium Hotspot network. And what this is, and there's been some changes, so I'll talk about this. Helium is a company that has gone through a couple iterations, and they are a low-power wide area network company, so sending little bits of data over long distances and at relatively low power. They had been using a network called Longfi, and it was their proprietary network. What they now are doing, thanks to a deal with Semtech announced last week, they're now using LoRa. So my Helium router that I have had now installed for about 2 weeks is now a LoRa hub. And LoRa is just another low-power wide area network, but it's far more common. It's not proprietary. So this is great for Helium. It's probably good for LoRa because while there are LoRa networks out there, there are none that could be self-installed and available just to casual people. So the Helium router is, okay, they use a cryptocurrency. They use tokens, basically, to authenticate the router's location, and to provide connectivity on the back of my Wi-Fi network. So a LoRa signal will come into this box, and then it travels over the internet using my Wi-Fi. So that is what I've signed up to. It reminds me a lot of phone, if you guys are old enough to remember the phone public hotspot network.
I think that's the one I had used.
Yeah, FON. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
back in the day. And nobody else used it, so yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the issue in the Helium hotspot is about $500, but right now they've got it on sale for $350. And I'm going to do a full formal review, but so far what I found is I'm not getting any pings because I live on Bainbridge Island, which is the middle of nowhere.
That was my problem with phone.
Yeah. I have not had any chance to get tokens, except I just opened the app. And as of yesterday, I installed this on March 2nd. And when you install it, it does, quote unquote, cost something. My costs were taken away, so I don't know if everyone's will, but it does cost tokens to set up and confirm, and then you earn those back as you start providing service. But as of yesterday, I actually have started getting tokens, and they're all because I have mined them. So you earn tokens by both just having the network set up, and then you also earn tokens by providing connectivity for someone if they request you. So basically, I am now up to 12 Helium tokens, and that's awesome. I don't know how much it costs to actually connect on the network, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring this over to a friend of mine who lives in Seattle, and I'm going to have her set it up, and we're going to see how it fares in a slightly busier place.
Plus, you'll then use your tokens to connect to other Helium hotspots. That's the idea here, right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
And I am about to invest in a LoRa sensor that I can set up both to see if it'll ping my hotspot and to see if I can ping other people's hotspots. So,
look at you. Ping, ping, ping.
Stay tuned for Stacy's LoRa Helium experiments. It's gonna be fun. So if you're looking at this, we put it actually on our gift guide because I thought it was an interesting enough and a fun enough thing to play with. And even when it was Longfi, now that it's LoRa, it feels kind of like a no-brainer if this is something you're interested in. I know it's a high upfront cost, but
yeah, and you may not see the return on those tokens if other people don't install Helium hotspot. That's really what it comes down to me.
Well, yes, but
yeah, there's that.
I feel like our listeners are early adopters and they like to play with things. So I want to give them, it's super easy to set up.
Do you get to name the SSID for the public to use?
No, so it actually names itself. I know.
That's a shame because I was going to say all of our listeners, we should set up one giant network with Stacy on IoT as the SSID.
Oh, that'd be fun. No, my hotspot is called Raspy Nylon Bobcat.
Oh yeah, it rolls off the tongue.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
So, if you're running around, actually, now you could actually find my physical address. Woo! Good thing I'm moving in a few months. Okay. Let us go to our next story, which is we're kind of getting into the news segments here, so we'll rustle on through these. Amazon Go. They have put their tech behind their Amazon Go stores for sale for other retailers, and they call it Just Walk In. instead of the app, so normally in an Amazon Go store, you have the Amazon Go app on your phone. You run your phone, you scan your phone in when you walk into the store, you pick up what you need, and then you walk out. And then a minute later or so, you get a receipt and a thing saying, hey, your whole transaction time took 43 seconds. What's going to happen with the customers who buy the Just Walk In software, there's going to be a credit card instead of an app because people do not want to download an app just to buy chips at like a grocery or chips at a airport kiosk. And you're not going to see this at Walmart because they hate Amazon, but you might see it at smaller retailers and or, again, airport kiosk type situations.
So this is interesting because a week or two ago, we talked about the big Amazon Go cashierless store in your backyard. I think it was like 7,000 plus square feet of groceries and such. And I was wondering, what is the business model here for Amazon? But now it makes sense. We do this tech and then we license it out, white label it so anybody can have cashierless stores using our tech, and we make money based on that infrastructure.
Right. It's based on AWS infrastructure. They're also going to make money selling it as, this is a service with all the cameras and such. The question is, what kind of data is Amazon going to get from this?
Bingo. That's exactly what I was thinking. And will they get meaningful data that they can help train models and further improve products and monetize on their own stores?
The answer is probably yes. Amazon
Probably
says
all
that
the
it will
above.
only get enough data to be able to track what people have bought, but that's actually
That's pretty valuable.
That's pretty good data. So we'll see. In other news, I think this is super fun. We followed Google's Project Jacquard since inception, way back in, I think it was 2015 or so.
Sounds right.
And this is the sensor-infused fabric that you basically use this fabric and then you clip a piece of electronics in it with a radio that communicates to your phone, and it acts as either interactive surface or it can pull data from those sensors.
Right. Like they have the jean jacket, for example, that has sensors in the sleeve so you can control your music on your phone, for example.
And they have a fancy backpack that cost $800, and the backpack strap has become an interactive panel. But
Right.
Here we have something that's cheaper and much more interesting. You want to talk about it, Kevin?
Yeah, so this is about $40 and it's a product that Adidas has put out. It's basically an insole for soccer players. Not just people who play soccer in the real world, but soccer players who also play the FIFA mobile games from Electronic Arts. And I have played those FIFA games in the past, and in the games, you can create what they call the ultimate team. So you can pick players from any league and the best players in the world and so on. And usually you have to play the games like drills to improve the player's scores, their attributes. Maybe you want to use the dribbling drills or the shooting drills, and that boosts how the player performs in those areas in game. Okay, what this insole does, it has a sensor in it, and when you play real soccer, in fact, there's going to be weekly challenges, it tracks your steps, the kicks, the dribbles, and everything else, and translates that into a drill for one of your mobile players, one of your virtual players. So instead of playing a game to improve the player, you literally go out on a soccer field and improve the virtual players through your own actions. And for $40, I mean, if you're playing FIFA Mobile and you're a soccer player anyway, I think this makes a lot of sense. It's not too expensive, and it's a good way to become more active and yet improve the mobile gaming experience.
Yeah, I think it's super fun because it ties your physical world to your digital world in a way that's actually really easy. So you just pop the Jacquard thing into the insole, you pop the insole into your shoe, and boom, you're up and running. And literally.
Yeah.
This to me is it life-changing? No. Is it super fun? Yes. Can I see it becoming much more interesting? Yes. Because imagine putting an insole for $40, putting a connected insole into an elderly person's shoe just to make sure they're A, walking around, B, not falling. That's going to be cool. Okay. And other cool, healthy things. Apple Watch is getting possibly a pulse oximeter feature that will help measure your blood oxygen saturation.
Yeah, and we're not sure yet how this will be done, whether it will be new hardware, or it could work with existing Apple Watch hardware using the heart rate monitor. And I say that because essentially 9to5Mac has found code snippets in the iOS 14 update that's still in the works. It's not available yet, mentioning blood oxygen detection and notifications. So it's certainly going to be a software update. Again, I don't know if it will need hardware. And we've seen devices, phones, for example, old Samsung phones, well, 3-year-old Samsung phones that use the camera sensor to detect heart rate as well as blood oxygen saturation. So again, may not require new hardware.
Yes, and I actually have a Fitbit Charge 3, which recently got this feature. And basically, it's tracking it while I sleep. It's not super helpful, maybe because I'm still in the healthy.
Well, you're still healthy, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But one day I may not be as healthy, and then I will be like, aha. So yeah, it's out there. It makes sense that Apple would do this. Also, Google Home, this is big, is getting sensor support. Google Assistant finally supports sensors and smoke detectors. Whoop, whoop.
At the moment, this is not news from a product standpoint because essentially Android Police has noticed that the types of devices that Google developers or developers for Google Home and Google Assistant can support has been updated. So nobody has taken their smoke detectors or water purifiers or other sensor-based devices and used this functionality yet, but it's just become available. So watch for that in the future.
Yeah, and that means basically we would have, if you detect this, do that kind of situation.
Yay. That would be very nice. Again, less reason for a true hub.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, you can count on me to always say that.
Arlo, the maker of, oh goodness, doorbells, cameras, smart home cameras. I feel like they've got other stuff now. They used to be part of Netgear, but then they were spun out and became a public company. Arlo is now going with two-factor authentication. It will be required for people using its cameras and products by the end of 2020. And they join everybody else who's doing this finally. Yay.
I sense a theme.
And then tied to this, we also are getting a new Ring doorbell. And there's one very special feature in this Ring doorbell that should excite everyone, including you, Kevin. It will have both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz capable Wi-Fi.
Thank goodness. And I say that because for people who don't know, most of the Wi-Fi chips in these types of devices have been 2.4 gigahertz only, very likely due to cost. And they have not always played well with certain networks.
Yes. So Ring is actually announcing 4 different products. The one with Wi-Fi is the Ring Video Doorbell 3 Plus, and that's going to be $229.99. There is also going to be a Ring Video Doorbell 3. The other feature in the Plus that's really good, and other doorbells have had this for a while, and I've always been kind of sad that Ring doesn't, they're going to have buffering. So they're going to capture the 4 seconds before motion is detected and show that to you, which is important because sometimes what happens is you see motion, it talks to you, and you don't see like the person coming into range to drop off your package. You basically see someone's butt as they're walking away from dropping off your package. So this is going to help you understand what triggered the motion alert. And that's going to be awesome. It is doubly notable because they're going to do this on a battery powered video doorbell.
That's impressive.
Wow. Okay. Those will be available for purchase on April 8th, 2020. Yay. All right. That's most of the news that's fit to talk about this week. We'll have more, I'm sure, for the newsletter later on. But now it's time to go to our IoT Podcast Hotline. This month on the IoT Podcast Hotline, we are offering a prize to people who call in. We're going to draw a prize, and that prize is the Aware Glow C, which is a air quality monitor that also can be plugged into devices and controlled based on the air quality if you into that sort of thing, or it can just act as like another smart plug. If you would like to be entered to win, give us a call at 512-623-7424 and just ask us your question or give us your insights. We actually get a lot of insights and we appreciate them. So if you're interested in winning, call us this month. We will put everybody in for a drawing. And if you reach us before midnight Eastern on March 31st and you're in the US or Canada, we will be able to help you. and enter you in for a drawing. Now, let's hear this week's question, which is from Matt.
Hi, Stacy and Kevin. My name is Matt, and I am a small town landlord and have been trying to figure out the best way to use some of the IoT items you all talk about, like flow meters and other products that might help safeguard my house and my investments, but without having to ask my tenants every time they move in what their Wi-Fi password is to reconnect my different items to their Wi-Fi network. Is there any way for someone like myself to leverage a LoRa network or an NB-IoT network for a low-cost way to make sure that these devices that only need to send a little bit amount of data can stay connected even in houses I don't have an internet connection in?
Okay, Matt, we have a lot of things to tell you. We're not 100% sure all of the things you want to do, so we're going to start with the simplest thing you want to do, which is leak detection. We have a suggestion.
Right. So we've talked about the products from Fin in the past, which they are smart water assistants that are basically tied into your water main. They make them for homes. They also have a Fin Plus model that we checked, and it can be used for a multifamily apartment building, even though it's intended for single family homes. It's going to depend, Matt, if your properties have individual plumbing lines and meters for each unit, because the Fin Plus will need that. And additionally, you'll need to have installed in each unit a pressure relief valve. So if that works for your properties, and again, we don't have the details of how many units and obviously the setups that you have, this could work, the Fin Plus. That'll run you $699, but then you would be able to detect water leaks in just about any of your units. Again, I'm assuming you don't have hundreds of units since you said you're a small landlord. That's our recommendation there.
Now, if you want to go a little crazier, there's some options. We feel like the best way to do anything for you as a landlord is to set up a separate network. It could be Wi-Fi, it could be LoRa. Wi-Fi is easier because it gives you more access to lots of devices. But you would set up your own landlord network in all of your properties. It'd be a big mesh, or maybe you'd use something like the Ubiquiti mesh Wi-Fi access points.
Right. And this would just be for you to connect your own devices to protect your investment. This would not be for residents to connect to for any purpose.
Right. So only you, only your devices. There you could set up, like if you wanted to, you could have individual leak detection things, knowing though that residents may move them, not realizing what they are. So there's issues there. And if you wanted to do something like outdoor cameras, I wouldn't do indoor cameras for so many reasons, but outdoor cameras, you could do that. And then you could invite residents to join in on the account if they wanted to see the app. But I wouldn't put things like thermostats on there because residents are not going to be comfortable with you being able to control their thermostat unless that's something you put in the lease. Same
with lights and things like that.
Yeah. So this would be purely protective, and you'd want to be very transparent with your residents or what are they called? Lessees?
Tenants.
Tenants. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I am a tenant.
Smoke detectors might be a decent idea.
You could do a smoke detector. I would say if you do that, though, a lot of them I would actually invite your residents to be part of that so they could get the remote notice as well. So that's how I would handle that. There are systems, if you don't do Wi-Fi, you could just buy more consumer off-the-shelf stuff. There are systems like MachineQ makes some systems and those use LoRa networks. That's kind of our advice for that so far. And if someone else has a brilliant solution, there are solutions, tons of solutions designed for this, but they're mostly designed for larger properties. So that is what we have to offer you today as a DIY kind of option. So that takes care of the IoT Podcast Hotline for this week. Remember, if you have a question, give us a call at 512-623-7424. Now we're going to go to our guest, who is Spencer Wright, who is the creator of the Prepared newsletter. It's a newsletter for manufacturing. He's also done several manufacturing projects and roles in his life. And he's going to be talking to us about the impact of COVID-19 on the supply chain. So stay tuned for that right after a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is MachineQ. Hey, Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is MachineQ, a Comcast service. I have Hannah Schneider, who is with MachineQ, here to talk to me. Hi Hannah, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. So, to kick it off, remind us, what is MachineQ?
MachineQ is a Comcast service which helps enterprises connect their operations through our portfolio of low-power IoT connectivity, as well as devices, gateways, and management software. We offer two primary products today, the first of which is our infrastructure product, and that includes our LoRaWAN gateways, APIs, and our flagship device and gateway management experience, MQ Central, as well as our platform product, which includes a suite of sensing devices that can include everything from temperature, leak detection, vibration, and more, all of which can be layered on our infrastructure product.
Awesome. All right. So we previously talked about MachineQ's product focus. Can you talk to me a little bit about an enterprise using your infrastructure today?
Definitely. Yeah. We'd love to highlight how we're working with the Fortune 500 automotive manufacturer that is using our infrastructure product. In this case, this company is looking to develop an internal solution to gain efficiencies in manufacturing and production line management while also exploring possible smart parking solutions. And because they operate enormous facilities up to 1 million plus square feet, they've also expressed interest in an indoor asset tracking solution to keep track of valuable equipment they often misplace or lose. To help solve all of these problems, this customer deployed our low-power IoT gateways and our core platform, which is designed to work at scale, processing millions of packets securely and reliably. Using our professional services team, this customer was able to stand up a stable, enterprise-grade, dedicated IoT network in less than a day. Our infrastructure is empowering them to drive innovation throughout their business as they continue to think through new use cases.
Whoa, all that in less than a day. So why did this customer choose MachineQ?
Yeah, prior to working with MachineQ, they had experimented with several other IoT providers, all of which specialized in one aspect of the IoT stack. So either working just with connectivity, just gateways, just devices, and they were really having trouble finding a partner who could address all of their needs while still helping them execute upon their plan. MachineQ was able to work with that customer to offer an integrated experience across devices, gateways, and easy-to-use management software, which empowered them to achieve their business goals.
That is really amazing. So where can our listeners learn more about MachineQ?
Listeners can learn more at machineq.com/Stacey. That's machineq.com/STACEY.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Spencer Wright, who is editor of theprepared.org, which is the creator of the Prepared newsletter, which I love. Hi, Spencer. How are you today?
Hey, Stacey. I'm great.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you on the show. So why don't you get us started just quickly telling us what you do with The Prepared?
Yeah, so The Prepared is mostly a weekly newsletter. It comes out on Mondays and has been for the past 6.5 years. It is recently a full-time thing for me, and it's mostly about manufacturing and stuff that relates to manufacturing in kind of an indirect or direct way. I myself, I work in manufacturing now, or kind of have for the past 6 or 8 years, but my background also spans into construction project management and kind of other aspects of kind of physical business and infrastructure. And so The Prepared is kind of about things that are related to that. Yeah, so every week I try to find things that are interesting and relevant to people who are either engineers or supply chain managers or just kind of managers in businesses that touch hardware in some way, and summarize it in a way that is accessible and appealing to people.
You do a great job. I think of it as the things in the Internet of Things. This last week, and probably prior weeks, you have been focused on COVID-19, or the novel coronavirus, and its impact on manufacturing. So I'd love to just dive right in there, focusing on what you're seeing or hearing from people in your industry about the virus in general.
Honestly, I think I kind of came to this a little bit late. The first thing that I looked into with regard to COVID-19 was just how it was affecting Apple's supply chain. So last fall, we launched a little web project that brings together all of Apple's supply chain transparency reports. And since 2012, they have been releasing the actual locations of the sites that they purchase from. And so we scraped all that data and put it in a in a website, which is supplychains.theprepared.org. And using that, I was able to get a gross idea of how much of Apple's supply chain is actually in Wuhan. It turns out that it's very little, right? Their supply chain, obviously is kind of China and Taiwan heavy, with also big presences in South Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, a little bit in India, a little bit in Brazil, and then, kind of a handful of locations in, England and the US and so on and so forth. But when I kind of first was looking at COVID-19, my question was just, how much are they actually exposed to just a general shutdown in Hubei province? Like I said, there's only actually 3 locations that Apple has ever disclosed they purchased from in Hubei. One company called Mako, which they purchased from in 2011 and 2012. Then Asia Vital Components, which has been on the list since 2013. And then Foxconn has a large facility there. So it is kind of an interesting way of using the data that Apple actually releases to understand what portion of their supply chain might be directly impacted by the city of Wuhan being shut down.
Okay, so that's Apple, and it sounds like they don't have a lot of direct impact based on location. And I'm sure you're not going to give me the secrets of Apple's supply chain, but I know that you guys have a Slack channel with a bunch of participants from the Prepared's readership and maybe outside of that. What are they saying about their supply chains?
Yes, that was actually maybe more interesting, honestly. And it's worth noting that Apple runs, well, A, they run a very tight ship, right? B, they manufacture very close to the time of purchase, right? So, I've heard dates quoted as short as like 6 to 12 days, right? Where they turn over their inventory very, very, very quickly.
So that means that the phone I purchased, for example, might have been made 2 weeks ago?
I think in some cases, yes. Now, I would probably be much better paid if I knew the details around that. But the short answer is that yes, I've heard numbers that are as short as 6 to 12 days from the moment of purchase back to the moment of manufacturing.
Awesome. So what are people saying?
Yeah. So, kind of unsurprisingly, most of the electronic supply chain works on much longer time cycles. Now, it depends on how large your company is. It also depends on what industry you're in as well. But I think that the net effect is that most people maybe haven't seen a direct impact on their business today, but they are expecting a significant impact in the next 2 to 9 months.
If I'm thinking like, all of my smart home device manufacturers, especially the larger ones, what kind of impact might we see for products made by maybe larger companies? I don't know if I should do it based on industry, it sounds like, or how to break this down, but can you offer me some breakdowns here?
Yep, absolutely. So I think you have to think first about what industry the company is in and when their largest sales periods are going to be. So for instance, anything that is likely to be a holiday gift, for instance, right? Like that needs to be on shelves by November, which means it needs to be landed in the US by October, which means it needs to ship from China, sometime in the end of August or something like that. That means that, if you're introducing a new smart home product in the 2020 holiday cycle, you're right now going through your last stages of rolling out an actual production line in southern China. You're going to run your production over the summer, and then you're going to ship at the end of August or something around then. What that means is that if no one's on the ground in the month of March, then you're going to see a significant ripple over the next 6 months, right? Because today is the day when you're locking down the actual process for how your product is put together and what assembly steps happen at what assembly stations, what your maybe final testing protocol is like, something like that.
And this means that I'm worried about lack of workers in a factory in China, but it also means that I, as a product manager, someone who's responsible for this here in the US or wherever, I'm also going to need to be physically there for that. This isn't something I can do remotely.
Yep. And that is maybe the harder thing, right? So one person I know who lives in Hong Kong and works with a number of contract manufacturers in the kind of Shenzhen area, he said that as of the last week in February, something like 5% of the factory that he works most closely with was actually on the floor, right? So you have a factory that has hundreds of employees and there are, maybe a dozen actually present at work. That's obviously problematic, right? Now, that has changed over the past week or two, and now you're starting to see people kind of come back to work. But the problem is that even though he lives in Hong Kong, he can't get over the border to actually visit the factory. That might not be a huge problem if this is a product which is in continuous production, if the floor managers know how it's assembled and they're able to respond to any issues in the production process. The problem is that if you're introducing a new product, then that person probably needs to be there on the floor actually showing the workers how to assemble it. And being in Hong Kong doesn't really help that much when you need to be in a factory in Dongguan. Even worse if you're, stuck back here in, New York like I am, or Boston or San Francisco. There's kind of an existential question about, how do I show somebody halfway around the world how to assemble this physical product?
Yeah. I'm like, I can't wait to see how we figure that out. And what about smaller companies? So I'm assuming that larger companies are going to have, when production comes back online, when people can travel, and who knows exactly how that's going to play out, but they will probably get priority. Is that fair to say? I mean, can they still recover for the holiday season, depending on if this lasts? I guess it depends on how long it lasts.
I spoke to somebody recently who, has some history in the consumer computer hardware business, right? He worked for a company that made laptops, right? And he pointed out that for laptops, your big market is back to school. Now, that means if you're shipping products to customers in August, then for your kind of lower end stuff, the high volume, high margin stuff, you're in production in March. And then you're actually, landing in the US in like July, right? So if they're not in production right now, and this is a new product, this is an industry where you have a complete turnover of your product line every single year. So every March, you're producing a brand new product. And if you're not in production in March, that means that all those high margin, low cost laptops that are supposed to be shipping to students in August, they're not actually being made. And so there are a bunch of things that companies like that can do. One is just reduce the number of SKUs that they ship, right? So you can go to, some electronics store and buy a laptop, and there'll be a number of different configuration options, right? You can get the large hard drive, the small hard drive, more RAM, less RAM, so on and so forth. Some of those companies can standardize the number of products that they're going to release in 2020, and they can probably speed up their supply chain as a result, because the fewer SKUs you ship to customers, the less setup time you need to produce those SKUs. The fewer, typically Western manufacturing engineers need to be on the ground in March. And you can just kind of speed up your entire production process through the spring. There are also questions, though, about those actual components, right? So I have another friend, and she works for a company that runs a bunch of data centers, and she was saying that they are having a really hard time actually purchasing new solid state drives. They ended up, having a reserve, and they were able to kind of move some stuff around and make it work. But you could definitely see component level shortages coming up in the next couple of months as existing inventories run out.
Ooh, that is scary, especially for all the data center operators. All my apps running my SmartThings may be... Okay, let's go a little to the smaller participants. So I don't know about you, but I back tons of Indiegogo, Kickstarter projects. Less now, but I'm still pushing out and hoping cool new devices come up for me from these smaller manufacturers. Should I just abandon all hope?
That's a good question. I mean, from a philosophical standpoint, my perspective on crowdfunding projects is usually that I'm I'm buying entertainment, right? I'm there for the ride, right? I'm there to get the campaign updates because that's kind of the most fun thing to me. However, as somebody who does actually want products, it's a really good question. I do know that, for instance, I run a little consumer electronics company. We make a little FM radio. Our printed circuit board assembly happens in Massachusetts. However, our printed circuit boards are produced in China. And I know a lot of kind of higher end electronics are made this way. We have a $60 retail price, which is rather expensive for an FM radio.
Yes, it is.
And a lot of those PCB suppliers, these Chinese PCB suppliers, they're either dealing with labor shortages or their production capacity is being eaten up by, pretty urgent requests from the Chinese government to make like thermometers and medical equipment, right? So what that means is that either your quick turn or even your kind of production scale printed circuit board manufacturers are going to be, increasing their lead times from a couple days up to, in many cases that I've heard about, 2 weeks, 20 days, something like that, which means that all of those revisions that you're making as you are kind of designing a product as a small team, all those revisions are pushed out from kind of like a week cycle to like a 3 or 4 week cycle. So yeah, I would be concerned about anybody who is rolling out a new product today. Again, with the caveat that when I back a Kickstarter campaign, I'm mostly interested in those campaign updates, talking about where they did have trouble. That's the fun of it to me.
That is true. And I don't think anyone tosses their money at these with the expectation of actually getting the product released. So it's like, ooh, maybe this will happen. Whoosh. Okay. So that is helpful. Do you think that companies who maybe have an idea, I have lots of people who listen they have great ideas. They're trying to build these small things. Should they just stop for a while? What would you offer to them?
Oh, I certainly wouldn't do that. I mean, I would say a couple things about that. I mean, one, anything is an opportunity, right? I mean, anybody who was making thermometers, for instance, that those companies are going to be selling a lot of units in this, this month or two, right? I also think, I mean, like I was saying, so the little company that I run, we make an FM radio. We do the print circuit board assembly in Massachusetts. We do our final assembly in both Massachusetts and New York. And we purchase in relatively large quantities a number of components from Asia. And we are well stocked on all those things. And if our lead times are extended by 8 weeks, that isn't that big of a deal right now. So my general advice for anybody who's starting a new product is to actually make a lot of them themselves. A, because it's fun. Like you never underestimate how fun it is to ask all of your friends to come over and eat pizza and assemble your baby. And B, it teaches you an incredible amount about manufacturing engineering. I mean, I have personally put together thousands of FM radios, and we have a really well-designed FM radio as a result, right? So I think that there is an opportunity here to take I hesitate to even call it a non-traditional path because, things have been made in the U.S. for as long as the U.S. has been around, right? And I think that if this whole thing, public health crisis aside, if its effect is to encourage American entrepreneurs to reconsider how they judge and how they evaluate different manufacturing locations, I think that would be a good thing. And I'm not all rah-rah about it. I just think that there are real benefits to having at least some of your production local, and at least during those kind of early stages where you're making, a couple thousand units. You can really learn a lot about your process, and you can actually save yourself a ton of headaches as well.
I like it. Okay, outside of COVID-19, what are some of the exciting trends in manufacturing that you've seen?
I guess I would say I'm excited for people thinking about manufacturing holistically and really considering, not just an innovation in like a fabrication technology like 3D printing and not just, some automation stuff on top of existing fabricating technologies, but, companies who are looking at the entire process of taking raw inputs into and converting them into components, and also taking those components and turning them into kind of finished goods. I would say that the tool that I have had the most personal success with in this world is Tulip, which we use for this FM radio, for the public radio. Tulip, which is this unified platform for manufacturing processes, I find to be a super interesting tool that has enabled us to, well, A, roll out to a new production line much more quickly, and then B, kind of integrate our kind of back end order management system with the actual production line. And so we have, people screwing things in, and literally a database record in the cloud is being updated automatically at the same time. And I know that for me, using Tulip to set up our manufacturing line made me just kind of think holistically about the way that our business works, from the customer placing the order to the order being ingested into our inventory system, to someone's scanning a barcode on a production line, to the actual shipping email where the customer kind of gets a notification that their item is going out the door. Kind of having a system that requires me to think about all those things and put them down in one place was incredibly useful to me. And I know that I personally am happiest when I kind of work across kind of traditional job boundaries, right? So, I'm doing some procurement, I'm doing some mechanical design, I'm doing some actual soldering, right? As somebody who is also then writing down the documentation for how our product is manufactured, having all those things in one place, it's just fun, right? Having a single place where I can log on and see the status of all my inventory, and then also, adjust my assembly instructions so that some line worker, has their life made a little bit easier. It's great, and it's exciting to me.
I will have to check that out. All right. Thank you, Spencer, so much for coming on the show this week. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stacy. Anytime.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.